comment on Ferguson, the police state, militarization of the police. These have all been on the table for tonight. We've got more coming up from Ferguson, where the allegation about the young man who was shot by a police officer that kind of kicked off all of the violence and the things that have happened since then, the protests, etc., that this young man was alleged to have been involved in a robbery. Daryl, you've got more on that story. Your calls and thoughts are welcome, though. And don't forget, we're on Skype. Our Skype username is lrn.fm if you want to get on here with us. So let's jump into that story, Daryl. What you did a little digging, because I'd said earlier that, in this rush of information that just continues to come in, whether it's reporters being arrested, reporters being shot with tear gas, individuals being, violently abused by the police. There's so much to absorb. The word came out at some point today or yesterday.
Came out today.
That the young man who was shot and killed by police, shot in the back, mind you.
Yes,
from 35
feet away.
As he was running away. That this guy was involved in a robbery. And you said, Daryl, that you hadn't heard that in the police report initially on the shooting of the man in the back.
Correct.
And that it just seemed to all of a sudden come out of nowhere.
Yes. So I have pieced together from two separate news reports, one from Fox News, one from the LA Times.
Okay.
Where they have each done, because, there's a lot of stuff to report on. They each have part of the story here, and I've sort of pieced it together.
Got it.
So this is taken from two different news outlets. Police Chief Thomas Jackson held an afternoon press conference today to say that Michael Brown and his friend Dorian Johnson were stopped last Saturday, quote, because they were walking down the middle of the street blocking traffic, end quote. The robbery was not related to the initial contact between the officer and Brown.
So that's the police officer there?
The police chief.
The police chief admitting that Michael Brown was not stopped because he was a suspect in a robbery.
Yes. So they have broken down what happened immediately prior to the interaction that led to Michael Brown being murdered.
Okay.
Police reports released on Friday under an open records request showed that at 11:51 a.m. on the day of the shooting, authorities received a 911 call reporting a robbery at the Ferguson market. An unidentified officer, who was later identified as Darren Wilson, apologies. The unidentified officer was not Darren Wilson in this circumstance.
Okay.
Unidentified officer was dispatched to the store and arrived within 3 minutes. That officer interviewed an employee and customer who gave descriptions of a man who stole the cigars, a box of cigars valued at $49.98, well under felony level grand larceny, a box of cigars, and walked off with another man towards a Quick Trip store. Descriptions of the suspect were broadcast over the police radio. The police officer did not find the suspects either on the street or at the Quick Trip, according to the report. Separately, Officer Darren Wilson had been responding to a nearby call involving a sick 2-month-old child from 11:48 a.m. until noon. So Darren Wilson was busy with another call during the time that the description of the burglary suspect was called out over the radio. So chances are he didn't hear the description. 1 minute later, he encountered Michael Brown and his friend walking down Canfield Drive. The documents released did not give a description of what happened between Brown and Wilson. Dorian Johnson, the friend, was not charged with the crime. So if the allegation is that Michael Brown and a friend robbed a store and took a box of cigars, then one would think that the friend would be charged with something.
So hold on.
But he was not.
Being an accessory, maybe.
You mentioned 1 minute later. Was the shooting of Michael Brown that close to the robbery of the store? Did I miss something?
Darren Wilson got off of the call from the sick child at noon.
Okay.
he encountered Michael Brown at 12:01.
Got it.
So 1 minute after he finished the call that he was on.
So there's almost no chance that he had gotten a description of the alleged robber, and no one said that Michael Brown was found with a box of cigars
right.
When he was shot
When
to death.
still photographs of the robbery were shown on televisions, watchers started comparing details of the suspect's clothing to what Brown was wearing and saying it could not have been the same person.
We will come back with more here in moments. You can take control. 855-450-FREE. This is Free Talk Live. And maybe you are with the police, and the militarization of the police is disturbing to you, or maybe you love it. Maybe it gets your adrenaline all pumped up. You love the idea of going out there and crushing some heads. We know there's cops like that out there, and unfortunately there are too many of them these days. So much information, hard to know what's true. Daryl, you were saying that based on your research, it appears that the people who allegedly robbed the convenience store of a box of cigars, you said may not have been the man Michael Brown, but yet the officer who was alleged to have shot Michael Brown to death in Ferguson, Missouri, he claims, Ellen, you said you saw a report saying that he did hear the report about the robbery.
Yes, I was actually just looking at a photo that was posted on Twitter that somebody just posted in the LRN chat room, and it's a photo of the police report, and in the report, the policeman says that I responded to that location and was given a description by dispatch of a black male in a white t-shirt that was walking northbound on West Florissant. So apparently, he responded to the location and then was given a description.
He claims in a report on stltoday.com, the officer claims that he thought, or that he saw in Brown's hand cigars, and that he realized that he might be the robbers. That's the claim, is that he actually did have cigars on his person in that case. But regardless of all these details, I don't think it really ultimately matters if he was the guy who robbed.
He was still
store.
unarmed.
Right. He was unarmed, and as you pointed out, this wasn't grand theft. This was a $50 box of cigars. Right. So the idea that even if this was the guy who robbed the liquor store, that someone should be shot to death or shot at all over a box of cigars, I'm sorry, I just don't agree with it.
No.
I think that's going too far.
And who is this police officer to make the instant judgment that, yes, this man is guilty? Like, he hasn't even had a trial yet. There's no way that you know that he's
a police
guilty.
officer. That's who he is to make the determination.
The judge and the jury all at once.
Which they're not supposed to be.
They're not supposed to be, but in so many situations, you see that they wind up doing things like this.
So, back to the news about Ferguson, Missouri. There seem to be differing stories about whether or not the officer who shot Michael Brown knew that Michael Brown was a possible suspect in the robbery. According to the police chief, apparently he didn't know, but according to another report I saw, he did know. So who knows what the details are there, but we did just hear, I guess, Ellen, you saw something during the break. Apparently, when he was shot in the back, he at some point had his hands in the air.
Yeah, witnesses say that he had his hands in the air, and the officer was saying, "Hands in the air, don't shoot." Like, and he had a weapon of some kind.
I had heard reports earlier that he was also saying, "I'm not armed,"
as he was running away.
Yeah, because the cops like, "Don't shoot! I'm not armed! I'm not armed!"
Yep,
and then still got shot 3 times.
There's another paragraph here that I'm reading that's really confusing because it's telling a completely different story than what I've been hearing. Police have said Brown was shot after an officer encountered him and another man on the street. They say one of the men pushed the officer into his squad car, then physically assaulted him in the vehicle and struggled with the officer over the officer's weapon. At least one shot was fired inside the car. The struggle then spilled onto the street where Brown was shot multiple times.
From 35 feet away.
The officer involved was injured with one side of his face swollen.
Yeah, the officer's claim is that Brown and him had some kind of altercation in the vehicle, but the officer admits to shooting him from 35 feet away. As he was fleeing, Brown was fleeing.
I don't know. Dorian Johnson, who says he was with Brown when the shooting happened, has told a much different story. He told reporters that the officer ordered them out of the street, then grabbed his friend's neck and tried to pull him into the car before brandishing his weapon and firing. He says Brown started to run and the officer pursued him, firing multiple times.
Just sounds like a horrifying situation. I don't know if any video was taken. Hopefully somebody around was able to shoot some.
I think there was some dash cam video, but it's not being released yet because one of the articles that I was reading earlier mentioned, there have been multiple Freedom of Information Act requests for the dash video. So don't know if there was any, but if there is, it hasn't been released.
Well, they're certainly not going to release that if they won't even release the name of the officer who is involved. And you know how you mentioned
they finally have done that officially.
They have officially now?
They officially did that this afternoon during the press conference at the same time that they said, oh, and by the way, this guy stole a box of cigars.
And they're calling it a strong arm robbery, which is interesting. There's a story about what people are saying in response to this. Some individuals, and I don't know, I think I closed that window, but there was one of the stories about this is getting comments from people from their Twitters about how they feel about this. Was this what does a strong arm robbery exactly mean? Was it his blackness that was the weapon that he used? Because apparently he was completely unarmed.
He used his very strong arms.
Right. Did he use his strong arm to reach over and grab the box of cigars and run out of the store? So anyway, all that aside, there's the larger issue of the militarization of the police, because we can quibble about the details in the story. Nobody really knows much of anything right now. There's the police side, and then there's the witnesses side, and I'm more likely to believe the witnesses in this one.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.